My guest is Chris Baker. He's been a part of the games industry for more than 2 decades with jobs at Marvel, LucasArts, and the official U.S. PlayStation Magazine, and a lot more. He's helped release more than 40 titles. He's written about hundreds of them for prominent outlets, including Rolling Stone, EGM, PSM, GameSpy, and more. He also wrote a book, so why are you just waiting around watching video game shows and playing video games? Why aren't you guys writing books? This guy wrote a book. It's called Wrong Retro Games. You messed up our comic book heroes. You can tell why I want to talk to this guy about Spider-Man. He's worked on tons of titles. Every Spider-Man console game from 2008 to 2014, Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which I'm going to stream a little Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite at the end of the show, Lego Marvel Superheroes, Marvel Pinball, Star Wars Battlefront 2, Lego Star Wars 2. Chris Baker is here. Chris, you have had the dream career, or you are currently having the dream career in video games.
I think you're currently having the dream career in video games, Victor. But yeah, I've had a pretty great career. I'm very blessed. You left out official PlayStation Magazine. That was my big magazine that I worked for, which is kind of up here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I did say it, and you have Spider-Man on the cover, and was that your review of Spider-Man?
That was my cover story back in 2002. Yeah, kind of a telling the future, I guess. I don't know. I also, actually, I think that the thing that kind of brought it all together, I interviewed Mark Hamill once, who was playing Wolverine.
Yep.
So I was doing a Marvel thing for a Star Wars character, and just living the dream in a sound booth with Luke Skywalker once. That was pretty sweet.
That is awesome. Well, you worked on the other side. You worked on the side that I've been working on for my whole career, is sort of trying to peek into the curtain and see how this stuff gets made and talk to people that build all this stuff. But you actually transitioned from writing about it and talking about it to helping to bring it out into the world. What's the biggest difference there? I know there's a lot that goes into that issue, but what's the biggest difference?
I think the thing that, when I finally did kind of cross over, like when you are in the press and you're seeing all kinds of things and they're all behind closed doors and you have all this access that the general public doesn't have, you get this impression that you're seeing a lot that people don't see. Yeah. And there's just so much more than that. Like, it's just the whole process of a game going from concept to reality it's very huge. A lot of people are involved, a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Sometimes great things happen to great games, and then those happen. Sometimes, unfortunately, things get canceled along the way, whether they're good or bad. It's interesting to me, like, I've seen games get canceled that were never announced. Yeah. That I was really excited about, and I can never talk about them. But, I'm sure that happens all the time. I was just talking on Twitter to someone about there's a bunch of canceled X-Men games out there, and I'm sure there's a bunch more we don't even know about. Yeah. Because, there were a ton in the 90s that were announced that didn't come out, and I'm sure there's a lot more than that, too.
It's amazing. You had long stints at Lucas and at Marvel, and you had stints with them with Lucas before Disney got involved. Yeah. And were you with Marvel as Disney acquired Marvel?
Yeah, I joined Marvel at a great time. I joined Marvel like right before Iron Man came out. Yeah. Wow. So, I got to be there like to see all that magic happen. Like when I started there, it was a really small office on top of a Mercedes dealership. Yep. And then they moved to an actual movie studio, and then they finally moved to the Disney lot after that happened. So
where did they edit the Iron Man movie? Because we did the making of Iron Man. I think that's right. We probably worked together on all that stuff. Yeah. So I interviewed Robert Downey Jr. and Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau. But it was Stan Lee and other people involved with these projects too. But and I got to go and see Iron Man get cut, and there was some special effects, but it was so nondescript. Where was that?
That was a place called Tribeca, just a studio offsite. Yeah. It was completely offsite. It was like, if you go to Tribeca for the day, you're going to go hang out with Jon Favreau and Kevin Feige and all them.
It was so chill, and like these were.
Yeah, it really was.
And it was, I guess it was pre the explosion of all this stuff. So absolutely. Nobody knew how big it was all going to get.
Nobody thought Iron Man was going to be anything. Yeah. And, then it made $100 million its opening weekend, and we all know where he is today.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Arguably the most popular Marvel hero right now.
So did you grow up a lifelong Marvel fanboy?
I've grown up a lifelong fan of superheroes in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just as big a fan of like Batman and Superman. But yeah, I mean, I certainly now know a lot more about Marvel.
Yeah.
Just because I worked there for 7 years, and you kind of that comes with the territory.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'm just a huge fan of superheroes in general. Star Wars, all the geeky stuff, Lord of the Rings. You know.
That's awesome. Chris, I know we're going to ask you to come back a million times because you have so much interesting perspective and so many ways in. I think we are, I mean, we've been friends for so long and we've worked together in a million different ways, but I know that I think we're kindred spirits and we have a lot of,
I believe so too.
A lot of shared sort of like we're fans of this stuff, which is awesome. But I want to,
my favorite. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So go ahead.
I was going to say my favorite is like when you would come up to me like at shows and be like, so why is Iron Man not good?
Yeah.
You know? Oh, yeah. You know, I tried.
Yes.
I did everything
I know.
Yeah.
Because that's all like the Indiana Jones stuff that never happened at Lucas. Like it sticks with me, you know? Like it just breaks my heart.
My life for a long time and then it's just gone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's easy to wish this stuff, hard to build it and hard to make it, and then hard to get people to care about it. And I know how expensive it is to build these things, and then to, you know, it's like a moving target. You don't know if the audience is going to be there for this. And I'm sure we're going to talk about some Spider-Man games today that were incredible, but we're just there on the sales, and then that sort of sends everybody back to kind of think about whether they're going to invest in the next one, right?
I guess so.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I don't really want to get into sales and stuff like that because honestly I don't really know.
Yeah.
I was never really privy to sales information and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But there was definitely it was always fighting the licensed game suck perspective. You know, like the kind of just.
Well, that is interesting because I personally, and I've said this on the record before, I think Spider-Man is the best video game character. I don't think there is a cooler character than Spider-Man because just moving is awesome. And like just whatever, whether it's a 2D one or it's a 3D one like Spider-Man 2 or the Ultimate Spider-Man, just super fun to move as this character. And then if you can inject the right amount of you know, storytelling and gameplay, you've got a recipe for huge success. So it's always been a question for me, like, why aren't there more? Like, one thing that I've always thought about is, you know, we have comic issues that come out every month. Why hasn't there been an episodic, action-oriented Spider-Man game that's cut up a little bit and we get new content on a regular basis that's kind of almost paralleled or tied to storytelling that we get in another medium? Chris?
Yeah, well, you know, it's a lot more. It's more work to make a video game than it is to make a comic book. Not that a comic book isn't a lot of work, as it is.
Yeah.
But you know, a comic book is somebody writing something, somebody drawing something, somebody coloring something. You know, editors and all that. It's more than just 2 or 3 people, but it's not 100 people. like a AAA game's going to take you. You know, we get pieces of what you're talking about, like with you know, the Batman Telltale games and Guardians Telltale games and stuff like that. But in terms of like just a, you know, an action open world kind of thing, yeah, that'd be cool to see. I think it, you know, it all comes down to sales. And you know, if Spider-Man could somehow become Grand Theft Auto Online, there you go. I think then
well, I mean, that's because you build the world, you've built New York, you've modeled it, you've put your characters. You just sort of focus, instead of throwing all of the villains into your story, you slice it up into pieces, and you have like, here's your 3 or 4 hour piece on the Lizard, and here's your 3 or 4 hour piece on the Vulture, you know, and anyways, that's a big deal. Let's talk about games that actually got made. The first thing I'm going to ask you is your favorite Spider-Man video game of all time. Do you have one?
I have 2. It's really hard for me to say, and it's not the one everyone else says. It seems the common answer is Spider-Man 2, which I like, but I'm not in love with it like a lot of people are.
Yeah. Is it the balloons, Chris? It's the balloons.
Partly. I could get into the whole thing about Spider-Man 2 if you want to, and maybe we will. Yeah. But just to answer your question, I think the most important and the one that really like made me an even bigger Spider-Man fan than I was the Neversoft game in 2000.
Yeah.
That was huge. That was, I would call, his first great game. He had, a couple arguably good games. Like, some people would say he had none at that point.
Yeah.
But there's a few that I liked at that point anyway. But that, like, just like you were saying with like the web slinging earlier, like, even though you were swinging into the sky most of the time in that game and, attaching to clouds and whatnot, just the feeling you got of like going from here to here to here to here, like that, I'd never felt that before in a video game. And that was pretty revolutionary. It was like a love letter to the Spider-Man IP in general. It had a lot of great villains in it. It had an awesome ending when, spoiler alert for a 18-year-old game, but at the very end, Dr. Octopus and Carnage come together, so you're escaping a big Carnage version of Dr. Octopus, which was really cool. So that was awesome. And then my other favorite would be one that I worked on, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest kind of love letter to Spider-Man, just because of all the kind of alternate universe takes and you had all the actors from the cartoons in it. Neil Patrick Harris even was in there.
Yeah.
Christopher Barnes, Dan Gavosdin from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Josh Keaton was the Spidey at the time. That was just a joy to work on. You even got like Spider-Man versus Juggernaut and Deadpool.
Yeah.
Which is weird, but
was Nolan North Deadpool in that one?
He was. Yeah.
It was terrific. Yeah. I love that game. That's absolutely near the top for
too.
me too. Yeah, incredible game. I feel like Spider-Man went through eras, and there's some baton sort of passing or torch passing as we move to different studios. Neversoft, they did two, right? They did
one. The second one was actually Vicarious Visions that was using their engine, I believe is how that worked.
So Vicarious got the handoff from Raven on Marvel Ultimate Alliance, and
that's true.
And they were sort of the studio that could pick up a piece and just build something cool with it, right? I think they even did that with Mysterio's Menace on the Game Boy Advance. They didn't do the previews.
That sounds right. I couldn't tell you for sure there, but I think they did do that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Vicarious Visions. So, but there was the Neversoft era, and then Treyarch, who made our aforementioned Spider-Man 2. They had a nice long run with Spider-Man as well.
Well, they had like 2.5 games. They had Spider-Man 2. They had the original movie game, which I also think is really great. And then they were like half involved with Web of Shadows, which was actually probably more like a third involved. Shaba Games was the main developer.
Yeah. Also a pretty solid Spider-Man experience as well.
I love that game. Yeah.
It was you were two characters in that one for a while, right? And
you were Spider-Man in either his traditional suit or his black suit, and that affected your powers and your attitude.
You were kind of like a vampire. You were a little bit more of a badass in the black suit.
You're definitely more of a badass. You were prototype. You're the prototype character in the black suit, basically.
Wasn't Moon Knight or something like that in that game?
Moon Knight was in that game. Yeah,
there was lots of great cameos. I enjoyed Web of Shadows.
Luke Cage.
Luke Cage. I feel like I play these Spider-Man games. I obsess over them, and I just love swinging around to every objective. And then I beat them, and then I still keep playing them because it's just hard to let go of the navigation. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, the other Treyarch game, which is a standout in all of these Spider-Man titles, is Ultimate Spider-Man. That was phenomenal with Brian Michael Bendis, I think, writing the story, right?
Yes. That was, as I understand it, he wrote that whole story. And at the time, this was later kind of adjusted, but at the time it was actual canon for the comic book series going on. They did actually adapt that. I think it was around 2010 or so. They did actually adapt that to a comic, and it was a little different, but it was still basically the same kind of story.
They were making fun of the balloon missions, I think, in that game as well.
It was an easy thing to do.
I think they were.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Oh,
the thing about that game was it was so beautiful. It was like, a Mark Bagley drawing coming off the screen and you playing in a comic book. They had the whole panel thing going on. It was a really beautiful game.
It was gorgeous. I loved Ultimate Spider-Man. But Spider-Man 2 is the one that I think is cited a lot as the best Spider-Man game ever made.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think that it's the web swinging, pure and simple. It's fantastic. It's a very hardcore gamer mechanic.
Yep.
Which is a lot of the reason that we haven't seen it much since.
Yep.
It never really got past that because it was so good for us hardcore gamers. Problem was, if you hand the controller to like someone who just kind of likes Spider-Man and kind of likes video games, they're just going to bounce all over the place and not do really well.
Right.
Like I was told that was the reason that it kind of changed because Ultimate was much different. And that was my actual biggest problem with that game was everything else is better.
Yeah.
But the web swinging is noticeably a downgrade.
Yeah, they simplified it all, right? Yeah.
But yeah, the web swinging. I reviewed that game in the official PlayStation magazine, not that issue, but
yeah.
And I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, which I know sounds low to a lot of people. But the way I justified that was it was a 5 out of 5 for the web swinging and a 2 out of 5 for everything else because the combat wasn't that good.
Yeah.
It was bad adaptation of the story. It had one really great moment with Mysterio where just like he was like a joke character and you just punch him once and he dies. That was like the kind of really fun moment. But yeah, I mean, I thought it could have been so much better. I thought it was like the best tech demo I've ever seen in a game.
Right.
And then the game around it was good.
Yeah.
It was fine.
Yeah.
But it could have been so much better. And I'm hoping that Insomniac's game is that and everything that's been great since.
Yes.
And then you'll have the ultimate game that Spider-Man can be.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about Insomniac's game for sure. And now that you've got this insight and you've worked with developers that have, taken the mantle and the responsibility of Spider-Man, I want to hear from that. We went from the Treyarch era, Shaba Games had it for a while. Then this company that was kind of anonymous. They weren't huge out there, but they had been working in games for a while. But Activision had made them a studio that kind of worked on other things. But Beanox took the reins of Spider-Man for Shattered Dimensions, Edge of Tomorrow, and did they do Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2?
They did. It's the Edge of Time.
Edge of Time, right. Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow was the Tom Cruise
That's
movie.
right, yes. Edge of Time. And Shattered Dimensions just blew us all away. And then Edge of Time was like a quarter of Shattered Dimensions. It just didn't have the...
Yeah. Well, it had a lot less time to be made, and it actually...
Which is perfect for the title.
In terms of like story, it's one of the better Spider-Man games. There's a huge plot hole in it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into that. There's a huge plot hole in that story. But Peter David wrote the whole thing.
That's amazing.
It's actually pretty rare for a writer to write the whole thing. They're normally like they write really important scenes and they do creative direction and that sort of thing. But Peter David wrote the whole thing, and it was a really good Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2099 story. It just didn't have everything else, so everyone thought it was half the game.
It was kind of like The Force Awakens 2 in a way.
Yeah.
After the first one came out, right? Like the first one of the first of Force Awakens, just like, oh my God, this is amazing. But they could fix a couple things. And then they did fix a few things in Force Awakens 2, but then it was like half the game. And that's kind of the way that I felt with Edge of Time as well.
It was a pretty short game too.
Yeah.
It was a pretty short game. But I thought the interaction, they did a really rare thing. They got Christopher Daniel Barnes and Josh Keaton in the sound booth together. And they had them like interacting with each other, like in the sound booth together. Usually it's like, you do yours over here, I'll do mine over here, and then they'll put them together and it'll sound like we're in the same room. They actually were. And they have a really good banter throughout the game.
The two Spider-Men?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so good. And then
it's also all inside. That's one of its biggest it's all inside.
That's true. And I remember Edge of Time bugging the hell out of me because I had to kind of do all these flying sequences where I'm whipping through fans. And I kept just falling and flying, and I kept doing that mission over and over again. I'm like, come on, let's mix this up a little bit. But Beanox is pretty damn solid. And I read the chat, and Blake also let me know that I called it Force Awakens, and it's Force Unleashed, and that was my bad. And I'm sorry, Chris. I know you cut that too. But
no, I didn't catch that, and I hear people say the opposite all the time too. Like, did you like episode 7, The Force Unleashed? And it's like,
they're close. Then so Beanox goes off and does The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, which were okay movies. They should have been better. I feel like what's the actor's name again? I forget his name.
Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, Garfield did a pretty good job as our Peter
Parker.
Parker.
Yeah, I was fine with him. The suit in the second one was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the movies themselves, I'm glad we moved on from those.
Yeah. Too much spectacle and CG and all that stuff. But I think they did an all right job building games around those properties, certainly taking on more technology that was available to them. They were fun, they were solid and shiny, but they didn't feel like they moved the needle, right? They didn't push the franchise or the gaming sort of levels forward for us.
Yeah, you know, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the last movie game I can personally think of. Like, we used to get them all the time. Like, every movie, every action movie gets a big game, and the Amazing Spider-Man 2 especially came out like very much at the end of that trend.
Yeah. Apart from the Lego stuff.
Oh yeah,
we still get the Lego games.
Lego it basically owns that idea now.
Yeah, and there was my favorite thing about the Amazing Spider-Man 2 was that you could play as Stan Lee, and you could they had a really nice sequence where Peter interacted with.
That was the first one.
Oh, was that the first one?
Stan was a character in the second one.
That's right.
Owned a comic shop. Yeah. But in the first one, I got to write some of his lines.
Some of Stan Lee's lines?
Yeah.
Holy crap!
There's part of that where Stan is saying, "I'm totally gonna tweet about this."
Yeah,
and that was me.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, but in Spider-Man 2, or Amazing Spider-Man 2, you could swing around as Stan Lee, and I thought that was a pretty exhilarating way to celebrate the guy. You know, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, he's. I think he's all dapper in a suit and everything for some reason. I don't know why we dressed him up like that, but
I like that a lot. But let's go back to the 2D roots of Spider-Man. And Blake, I think there's some Atari 2600 footage in here. We got introduced to Spider-Man, and you're younger than me, Chris, but we got introduced to Spider-Man as a video game character very early in the history of video games. And I remember I bought this game, and it cost me money, real money. And I played it for hours, and I thought it was cool. But what is it about Spider-Man that makes him resonate and makes him a good character?
Oh, wow. I think it all comes down really... Well, okay, the superficial thing is his powers are really cool.
Yeah.
You know, like, no one had ever really just crawled up a building before him. No one had ever, like... probably people had grappling hooks. That's not true. People had slung through the city, but not in the same way.
Yes.
So the powers are cool, but I think at the end of the day, it's the Peter Parker-ness of it all, the relatability to the character that everyone has. And, you know, I enjoy reading Peter Parker as much as I enjoy reading whatever Spider-Man is doing to save the day. So
yeah,
I think that is kind of the heart of it right there.
We have moved on, obviously, to 3D Spidey games in a big way, and there's fighting games and there's Lego games. We'll talk a little bit about those as well. But 2D, I still feel, and we're going to be running a buried treasure that's sort of on this line later in the show today. But I feel like 2D and Spider-Man is still a match made in heaven, just like our last Metroid Samus Returns was just one of my favorite games of last year. Do you think we'll ever see 2D Spider-Man games again, or is that done? Were there enough made?
You know, it's probably mostly done. I don't know what's in the plan for them right now.
Yeah.
I will say in the DS era, there were some overlooked gems. It's funny you mentioned Metroid because they were Metroidvania kind of games. The Web of Shadows DS game and the Shattered Dimensions DS were both really good games by Griptonite. I actually made a YouTube video about them recently.
What's your channel? Because I've watched some of your videos. You're fantastic. You really I mean, you know so much about this stuff. So let everybody know your channel.
Yeah, it's youtube.com/cbake76, CBAKE76,
which is
also my Twitter.
Yeah, your Twitter handle.
Yeah.
And so we'll put all that stuff in the description after the show. But yeah, make sure you check out his YouTube channel. It's awesome. You're a great narrator, and you've got a lot of wisdom, and there's some unique vantage point as a fanboy who got to make this stuff. It's great. So Kryptonite made us some cool. Now I have to go and dig into my library.
Yeah, they're only like $10. They're only like $10, $15. So get them while they're still cheap. But yeah, they're like 4 hours each. They're not gonna take a whole lot of time to beat. Yeah. But the combat is so good in those. And, it's your typical kind of, beat a boss, then you can access this area you couldn't access before, go backtrack a little bit, the classic kind of Metroid Castlevania.
Awesome. That's music formula. To my ears. Is there a favorite 2D Spider-Man game that you have?
Maximum Carnage.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Maximum Carnage came at a time when I grew up liking Spider-Man and watching cartoons and stuff like that. Maximum Carnage hit around the same time as the 90s Fox show. And both of those are what really made me pay attention to the character and his universe beyond just being a cool guy who swings around a lot.
Yeah.
The gameplay's pretty plain, but it's a solid beat 'em up, and it has a really good presentation style where it actually adapts panels from the comics.
Don't you find when you go back to 2D games, and we've been making a lot of documentaries, like we did this thing on Metroid, and we've done some Fire Emblem stuff, but I find, and I've had this in conversation with a lot of peers and contemporaries as well, is like that 2D sprite-based stuff. It just ages so well. It still looks great, it's still beautiful work in comparison to like Spider-Man 1 on PlayStation 1 is a killer game. It's awesome, and there's so much you can appreciate about it. The art does not hold up. The big globby sort of pinata hands. And
Black Cat's breasts are triangles that point out. Yes. It's kind of embarrassing. Yeah. I mean, I think in general, the 16-bit era, I think, has some of the best looking stuff that you can go back to and play and still have a good time with.
Yeah.
I mean, especially, talk about 2D art that's beautiful, and Spider-Man, the Capcom stuff that they did for Marvel versus Capcom and Marvel Superheroes and all that the animation is superb.
It's incredible. And
it really holds up today even.
I mean, those games are just like candy to me, like I'm not a diehard, like I play them competitively or whatever, but when I play the Marvel versus Capcom stuff, it is just divine. You get lost in this flash. Like you just cannot believe what your eyes are taking in, it's just gorgeous. Yeah. Especially if you like these characters.
Do cool stuff, and that's what I love about those games too. I'm not a big fighting game guy myself, but like you said, I worked on Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and I poured my heart and soul into that game as much as I could, and I got to do stuff like pick the costumes everybody wore as alternates and stuff like that, and just basically my job at Marvel, I don't think I actually said was but to approve things. So like, does Spider-Man look right here?
That's
and yes
awesome.
Or no, he doesn't. You need to do this to make him look right. Like that's the very basic kind of description of what the job was.
So who approved you approving things? Because that sounds like an amazing position, but also one with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, when I worked at LucasArts, I met a producer there named Justin Lambros, who actually is recently worked on the Guardians of the Galaxy game.
Yep.
At Telltale. But yeah, at the time he was the VP at Marvel, and he liked me when I worked at LucasArts, and he knew that I knew this stuff, and he knew that I think about games and the way that games should be thought about to try to make them better.
Yep.
And so he actually came to me, and at the time I was like, I'm at LucasArts. Star Wars is my favorite thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's okay. You can have many loves, my friend.
Yeah, but and I was trying to get into game development at LucasArts at the time, and that just wasn't happening. So I was like, I'll try this Marvel thing out, and so I moved from San Francisco to LA, and was there for like 7 years.
That's amazing. That's awesome. You've worked with so many developers, and I think this is appropriate as we kind of sort of dovetail into talking about Insomniac's game and the responsibility that they have. And I talked to Brian Intihar at E3 last year about that, because There's been a lot of great games. We've just listed off, I don't know, 20 great Spider-Man experiences here that are all still worth playing. But what do developers invariably have to have? What kind of qualities and what kinds of passion do they have to show you guys when you were at Marvel that you like affirmed that they're going to be the right people to do this kind of stuff?
Well, I personally didn't have much say in how the developers were chosen. That was more of an Activision call. But you could always tell kind of early on like how great a game was going to turn out, kind of by the passion and the just kind of early concepts and everything. Like the Shattered Dimensions concepts were really creative and really interesting. They went through several kind of conceptual stages. It wasn't really what it was at the beginning. Probably can't really talk about that, but it's really. I highly recommend getting in the game industry and being a developer and seeing like how things change. It's so cool.
Yeah,
so cool.
It is cool. Absolutely.
Yeah, but yeah, it's cool just seeing how that all happens. Now, and yeah.
Did you? Brian Intihar used to be a part of the journalism pool. Did you work with him?
He was a coworker. He was literally a coworker. He's a friend of mine. Like the night they announced that game, I was like, Brian, are you on this? And he's like, yeah, I'm creative director. What?
That's amazing. So he was at US PlayStation Magazine as well?
No, he was at EGM.
At EGM, okay.
PlayStation Magazine.
Yeah.
We were, down the hall, and we talked to each other all the time. We were like the people who played sports games in the office.
Yeah.
A lot of people, not a lot of non-sports games players. So we did a lot of like playing Madden together, often for review and baseball games and stuff like that. It's funny. I remember when I left OPM in 2004. I told Brian I had a job opportunity in LA, and he was like, "Is it Activision for Spider-Man?" Because he knew I was such a big Spider-Man fan. It wasn't, and that job didn't come to be, but eventually LucasArts did. So
it is amazing that how windy the paths are through all of this
stuff.
Is. Yes.
It really is.
Have you had a chance to talk to him about what Insomniac is doing now with Spider-Man? And I know you've done some videos dissecting the trailer and all that stuff. Is it in good hands? Does this feel like the Spider-Man game you want?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everything I've seen, I absolutely love, and it seems like, they're Sony is super behind, putting all the resources necessary behind this to make this the best Spider-Man game ever, and I'm frankly at this point I'll be disappointed if it isn't. I really think they stand a very good shot of being the very best Spider-Man game that we can expect, and I'm really happy for my friend Brian for helping to pull that all together.
Yeah, that's such an amazing company too. The fact that Insomniac has been this independent force with all of this, experimentation and great titles and huge AAA and just great people all the way.
Totally.
You've worked with them too closely, because especially through your PlayStation.
I've known James Stevenson maybe even longer.
Yeah.
I never worked with him, but he was at Cinescape magazine.
Amazing.
Like way like 2000, 2001, something like that. And we would meet at press events and just kind of hang out, and he's come a long way himself.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a great fit. I'm super, super psyched for this. Would you say, what do you think has been the most inventive? I guess we're handing out the Spider-Man Game Awards right now, but what was the most inventive Spider-Man? I keep thinking that Shattered Dimensions deserves a little more recognition for what they did,
Inventive in terms of like gameplay or story, or what do you mean exactly?
I guess a little bit of both, or maybe there's a separate category in our Spider-Man Awards for gameplay and a special category for concepts or storytelling.
I think Neversoft for its just overall great Spider-Man experience. That they, the way they did 3D motion, I would say was pretty inventive.
I just, we talked about N64 games yesterday, and I played a little Wave Race, and it hit me that 21 years ago when that game came out, we had never played anything like that before.
Right.
And Spider-Man was just like that. We'd never played Spider-Man like that before. It was mind-blowing when that thing came out. You're absolutely
And
right.
then, so yeah, Spider-Man 2 perfected that to the point that hasn't been surpassed yet. So
Yeah.
that's a Spidey award, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think Shattered Dimensions, just the sheer amount of Spider-Verse, literally the Spider-Verse. There was a comic story a few years ago called Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
And Dan Slott wrote that. He also wrote Shattered Dimensions. And
Love Dan
Slott. Before that Spider-Verse was announced, I actually talked to Dan, and he was like, "Yeah, we're gonna do this thing called Spider-Verse. It's basically Shattered Dimensions, but just blown out times a million." And I was like, "Wow, that sounds awesome." So yeah, that was a pretty cool idea, and just the love that went into that, and all the voice actors and everything that we kind of talked about. Yeah, I mean, you give me some time, I could come up with a whole list of the Spidey Awards. We could do a whole show.
I don't think this has to be the last time we get you on the show talking about Spider-Man, man. And I think a Spider-Man Awards thing would be amazing. But I want to talk a bit right now because I know a lot of people, and I have this question all the time, like, what would it take to get a Spider-Man set of all of these titles together? Because the rights keep moving around and the developers keep moving around, and there's different characters attached to some of these things. Will they only ever exist because of the way that the rights have been filtered out in the original platforms on the cartridges and discs that they came out?
Never say never, but I would say that's highly likely. Like,
so unfortunate. Because so many.
Maybe someday Parker Brothers gets the rights back to Spider-Man and they can re-release that 2600 game that we really want.
So first of all, somebody has to get the rights to Parker Brothers, build the company.
Actually has the rights to Parker Brothers.
Oh my God!
Which, by the way, Parker Brothers, what better company to put out a Spider-Man game?
Yeah.
There's only one Parker, but still.
Yes, that's true. It's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so according to Chris Baker, the Spider-Man game, what's it called? Is there a subtitle to Insomniac's game, or is it just Spider-Man?
It is Marvel's Spider-Man.
Marvel's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
According to Chris Baker, he's said it right here on the show. You heard it. You can quote him everywhere around the internet. Go right ahead. Write your stories. Marvel's Spider-Man is going to be the best Spider-Man video game ever made, right?
I think I said I'd be disappointed if it's not, but yeah.
Not to put the spotlight.
I will say that though, just for the sake of the sensationalistic headline that you need for your clickbait or whatever.
We're creating clickbait right now. That's awesome. Blake, has anybody been asking any questions or anything like that? We've got live viewers that are watching in here, Spidey fans, true believers out there that might have a question.
Someone wants to know if Bruce Campbell's in the new game.
Ah, fantastic question. And I don't know, neither of us can answer that really. Is Bruce Campbell in the new game? We don't know.
Be cool.
It would be cool.
I don't know. I don't know anything more than you guys know.
Yeah, it would be
that
cool.
Abundantly clear. A lot of people ask about release date. I don't know when it's coming out.
Yeah, they've been very coy about that, haven't they?
Yeah.
You heard God of War is April 20th.
I did, yeah. And that actually, I've been saying the past, month or so, like, they could surprise us as early as late March, but I think it's probably going to be closer to fall. September is my guess, but
PlayStation had a bit of a bummer year last year. Like they had some good games, but they didn't have like the boom, like they didn't just like drop it all on us. This could be that year though. Do you feel like we're going to get this?
God of War and Spider-Man alone are huge.
Do you think Last of Us 2 comes out this year? Do you think Ghost of what is it? Sushi? I can't remember the name of the.
The thing is, I'm so excited about those two games specifically that I'm not even thinking about Last of Us. Yeah, I guess that's coming. Yeah, sure.
It's crazy, right?
Last year was overall for gaming, last year was one of the best we've ever seen, I think, and this could even be better.
So Marvel is now going, and I know you don't work there now, but you work with them because you're working with Zen on the Marvel pinball stuff, and these guys, like the Zen pinball games, are incredible. And you worked with them when you were at Marvel, I guess, right?
Yeah, actually, when I was at Marvel, I did a lot of design work on them, actually, which was pretty fun. But my end of the day job was to approve everything. But I got to do things like in the Infinity Gauntlet table, I was like, you get the reality gem. Why not just go all out with it? You're a video game. Turn the screen upside down when you use the reality gem.
That's
so,
awesome.
The reality gem's in play. You're playing pinball upside down.
That is incredible.
That's just
I have to tell you,
simple
those Marvel tables are my favorite tables. And this is how I used to bicker with Scott Jones, my colleague here on Review, who you know through the journalism. He would say, why are we playing video game pinball? Why are we reviewing these things? I said, I love them. They're so relaxing and they're so cool.
Yeah.
And I've always loved them. I loved them on the 2600. I loved Flipnik on the PlayStation 2. But the Zen pinball are the best, and I love the Marvel stuff the best. I would buy them on the iOS platform. Every time I'd get an Android device to review, I'd buy them all again on Android. They'd send me codes. I'd play them on the PlayStation machine. I had them on, so they're like all across everything, and they just sent me codes for the Switch version as well.
Yeah,
and they're incredible tables. But the Marvel stuff is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, they also did Back to the Future, E.T., Jaws recently as a Universal pack, which are all pretty great. There's a bunch of Star Wars stuff out there.
The Star Wars ones are good too.
Yeah, those are great too. I will say, I'm contracting with Zen now. I'm not like a full employee or anything, but yeah. I love this company. It's a fantastic company, and there's nothing I played more after it came out than the Marvel pinball games.
You go back to them, right?
They're so replayable,
Yep.
and there's a good competitive. You have friends playing.
Yep.
It's like a total battle for best score kind of thing. I think even early on, you and I were.
Yep. I think it was your tweets because you were talking about these things so much, and we were posting scores. And I remember John Davison was involved in some of this stuff, and there's other people that you just know across the industry that are, bragging, and you're like, well, okay, I'm coming up.
Spider-Man writer Dan Slott, who is soon ending his years-long run to move to Iron Man, but Spider-Man writer Dan Slott, in a few years ago, I don't know where he is now, but he was like number 100 in the world in Xbox 360 Spider-Man pinball.
That's incredible. That is amazing.
Yeah, he was way up there. Like just unapproachable for me. Like I think I'm pretty good at that game, but Dan Slott was taking breaks from writing your Spider-Man comics to play Spider-Man pinball and kick everybody's ass.
I guess he feels like that's a harmless get, but if you're one of those people that puts a quarter down and plays forever, Dan, you're not writing your comics, my friend.
No, actually, he told me once one thing he loves about the game is you can just pause it and come back later. Yeah, and you get like a nice 3, 2, 1 countdown to prepare you. You're not gonna get your ball out necessarily right away. So
are you psyched now? Marvel is saying they're going back full on into console game development because there was a big chunk. I mean, pretty much after you left.
Yeah, after I left, there was a lot of.
It's like, what the hell are you doing, Marvel? You have like the Avengers movie. I don't know if you guys know this, but a lot of people are going to your movies. Where are your video games, man? And now they're back. Now does that make you feel good? Does it make it feel?
Yeah, I'm excited. I wish Bill Roseman and his team all the best there. I'm excited to see what Avengers project's all about. I really have no idea.
Yeah.
I would guess like a 3D action game, but who knows at this point? We just have that trailer.
Yeah.
Of course, Spider-Man's gonna be great. I don't even know what else is in the pipeline at this point.
I hope a ton because.
I hope so too, and I kind of think there will be.
Yeah.
I kind of think we're in a new kind of renaissance for Marvel games.
Yes.
But
yes,
just have to see.
Blake, did we get any questions for Chris? We talked about a lot of stuff, my friend.
Some people want to know how long Sony's going to own the rights to the game.
Oh, I think this is an important question.
I don't think we know that.
Yeah.
Those. Unless they come out in a press release with that kind of information, it's very secretive in that regard. I have no idea.
Do you have thoughts as a former Marvel employee and as a lifelong Spider fan?
I'm sure they have enough time for like a trilogy,
right?
At least.
And what about their exclusivity? Do you think that that's kind of a drag that that this wonderful game will only be available on this one platform?
To Xbox owners, it is, and Switch owners, it is. Yeah, I'd love to see it elsewhere too, but that's just not going to happen as long as it's a reason for people to buy PS4s and maybe PS5s.
Yeah,
I don't really see that happening.
PlayStation 5. It is time to start talking about the PlayStation 5.
Unless Microsoft buys Sony.
Yeah.
Maybe Disney buys them both. Who knows? That's the kind of world we're in these days.
Disney is on a shopping spree, aren't they? It's so crazy. Yeah. It's awesome. All right. Okay, my friend. I think that's not enough Spider-Man chat for me, but I think that's quite a bit of Spider-Man chat for this episode. We are going to definitely have you back if you would answer our Spidey beacon and come back and be on the show.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe talk about some Star Wars video.
I'll answer any beacon. I'll answer a bad signal.
Okay.
If you want to throw me a bad signal sometime.
All right. Well, I know I love comic book movies and comic book video games, and I know that you're right in line with all of that stuff. And well, let me get one quick thing. You're a huge Star Wars fanatic.
Yes.
Last Jedi.
Loved it.
Loved it?
You know, actually, I will say, walking out the first time I saw it, I was like, I think I like that.
Yeah.
I had some reservations. The second time, I noticed a lot more of the kind of subtlety and like my favorite joke in the whole movie is right at the beginning when there's like a porg jamming down on a lightsaber hilt. Like he's about to kill his friend.
Yes.
Like it's so subtle. I didn't even catch that.
It's so subversive.
I caught it the second time. I think a lot of people probably don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
But like he's literally on the handle, the switch of the lightsaber. If he does this instead of this, his friend who's like this, oh, what is that? It's gonna go.
They were in harm's way, those porgs, the whole time.
And then there's stuff like, Leia awakens like right when Luke reunites with the Force. Like, that's something I didn't notice the first time. And there's there's 5 or 6 things like that throughout the movie that if you watch really closely, it's like, oh, the timing on this is really perfect and deliberate. And
yeah,
I've never thought like that in a Star Wars movie before.
Interesting. You're making me recognize a point right now. We're in a kind of a similar state with Star Wars video games that we were with Marvel, apart from Battlefront. But it feels like EA, they're in a precarious situation right now. They can't afford, I think, to piss off the fans out there. But they have like things coming. And hopefully they're all fantastic. But it does feel like we're in that absence of, diversity in the gameplay styles with Star Wars right now. It's either mobile.
Yeah, outside of Battlefront, we really haven't had anything since The Force Unleashed.
Yeah,
I'm dying for another just 3D action game.
Me too.
And I was hoping that for Visceral, but I guess that's not happening. And, I'm sure they have somewhere between 2 and 5 things in the pipeline they haven't told us about yet.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of stuff they're considering, but yeah, hopefully 3 or something this year will give us some news.
Chris, I know when we're going to have you back. We're going to talk about Star Wars games just before the Han Solo movie comes out, or
great,
around that time frame. But Chris Baker was on the show, and he was phenomenal. Thank you so much, my friend. We will see you very soon.